This is Lewis. Lewis has cystic fibrosis. This is Maisie, Lewis's little sister. Maisie doesn't have cystic fibrosis. If you watch the rest of this video, you should be able to explain why. The video is broken into chapters, so here's the list if you want to skip ahead, though it will make a lot more sense if you watch it from the beginning. So let's get started. If you're new here, welcome to BioSmash. I'm Jo. I'm a science teacher and a clinical scientist. Cystic fibrosis is a condition that affects the mucus that our body makes. In people with cystic fibrosis, their mucus is extra thick and extra sticky. This causes problems for the lungs and the digestive system, in particular the pancreas. These two organs normally make mucus, but when the mucus is too thick and sticky, it can build up and stop the organs from working correctly. If you want to know more about the jobs of these organs, you could check out these videos, which I'll link below. People with cystic fibrosis often have breathing problems and lots of chest infections because of the mucus in their lungs. They may also not grow as tall as other people their age, have weight loss, or develop cystic fibrosis related diabetes due to the pancreas. In males with cystic fibrosis, the tube that carries the sperm from the testes to the penis can also become blocked with mucus and not develop properly. This can cause infertility. So remember, all of our bodies produce mucus, but in people with cystic fibrosis, the mucus is extra thick and sticky. Cystic fibrosis happens when a particular gene doesn't work properly. In most of us, this gene is the recipe for making a particular channel protein. In most of us, the channel protein fits into the cell membrane and helps to transport a certain chemical in and out of our cells, and this process affects how sticky our mucus is. In people with cystic fibrosis, the gene contains a mutation that means that the recipe doesn't work and the channel protein isn't made correctly. This means that the channel protein can't do its job and the chemical can't move in and out of the cells, so the mucus is much thicker and stickier than it should be. Hopefully, you can now see that there are two different versions of the gene that makes a channel protein. The working copy of the gene makes the protein, and the copy with the mutation doesn't. We call different versions of the same gene alleles. And I've made a video that explains these keywords and lots of others in much more detail, so if you haven't watched that, I suggest you check it out and the link is below. In that video, I also mentioned that one of the alleles will be dominant and the other allele will be recessive. So this means that if both alleles are present, the dominant allele will show its effect and the recessive one won't. So in this case, the working copy of the gene is dominant and the copy that doesn't work is recessive. We usually use a capital letter to represent the dominant version of the gene, the dominant allele, and a lowercase letter to represent the recessive allele. Here I've used the letter A, but it doesn't have to be an A. You could use a capital F and a lowercase f, or a capital H and a lowercase h. But in this video, we'll stick with the letter A. So we've got two alleles, two versions of the gene, big A and little a. We inherit our genes from our parents, and because we have two parents, we have two copies of most of our genes. This means that most of our genes come in pairs. This means that we all have two copies of gene A, one that we got from our mother and one that we got from our father. In many cases, people will inherit a working copy of the gene from both of their parents and have two copies of the big A allele. We use the word genotype to describe the combination of alleles that somebody inherits. And you can see that this individual has two of the big A alleles, so they can make the working protein. They've got the dominant allele. Because they have two copies of the big A allele, they can make lots of the protein that they need and they make the normal mucus, so their lungs and digestive system work normally and they do not have cystic fibrosis. But a small number of people have the genotype little a. Because they have two copies of the recessive allele, they can't make the protein that their body needs, and this means that their mucus is thick and sticky, causing them to develop symptoms of cystic fibrosis. You might be asking, what happens if you inherit one of each allele? So you've got the genotype big A, little a. Because the big A allele is the dominant allele, it's this allele that will show its features in the person. The little a allele, which is linked with cystic fibrosis, only shows its effect if the dominant allele isn't present, and that's because the little a allele is recessive. So if someone has a genotype big A, little a, they will be healthy and not have cystic fibrosis because the effects associated with the big A allele are dominant. However, we do say that people with the genotype big A, little a are carriers because whilst they do not have the effects of the little a allele, they do carry it and can pass it on to their children. So hopefully you can now explain why Lewis has cystic fibrosis. It's because he has 2 copies of the recessive little a allele. Give this video a thumbs up if you're starting to understand this topic better. Let's look at how this happened. Here's Lewis, and Lewis has the genotype little a, which is why he has cystic fibrosis. Lewis inherits his genes from his parents. This means that each of his parents must have a little a allele. But his parents don't have cystic fibrosis, so they must also have the dominant big A allele, which will show its effects over the recessive allele and mean that they do not have cystic fibrosis. When the parents made the sperm and egg cell that created Lewis, they happened to put in their little a allele, so Lewis inherited 2 little a's. We say that Lewis's parents are carriers. This means that they don't have the condition themselves, but they do carry the little a allele and can pass it on to their children. If you're finding this video helpful, it might be good to click subscribe. It'll help you find my other videos. But what about Maisie? She has the same parents as Lewis, so why doesn't she have cystic fibrosis? Remember, Maisie and Lewis's parents are carriers. They both have the genotype big A, little a. We only pass on 1 copy of each of our genes to our children because they get the other copy from the other parent. This means that each of our egg or sperm cell contains only 1 copy of the gene. Because Lewis and Maisie's parents are both carriers, all of the egg and sperm cells will either contain a big A allele or a little a allele. Let's look at the possible children they can create. We draw a genetic cross diagram to show the possible children that somebody can have. If a big A sperm cell meets a big A egg cell, the child will inherit a big A from the mother and a big A from the father. So they'll have the genotype big A, and their phenotype will be healthy. They won't have cystic fibrosis. If the big A egg cell meets a little a sperm cell, the genotype of the child will be big A, little a. Again, this child will be healthy because the big A allele is dominant. However, the child will be a carrier like their parents. The genotype will also be big A, little a if the little a egg meets the big A sperm. And again, this combination will result in a healthy child, but a child who's a carrier of cystic fibrosis. Finally, if a little a egg cell meets a little a sperm cell, the child will inherit the genotype little a. And this child will have cystic fibrosis. So, hopefully, this diagram helps you to understand that not all of the children the parents have will inherit cystic fibrosis. If you're finding this video helpful, I'd love to hear from you, particularly if you have any requests for future videos. If you've reached it to this point in the video, you are doing really well with your revision. I've put together a few questions to help you check that you've understood everything. Lewis and Maisie's parents are pregnant and expecting a brother or sister for Lewis and Maisie. So here's our first question. What is the chance that the next child will not inherit cystic fibrosis? I'm about to show you the answer, so pause the video now if you want more time. When you're asked this type of question, it's really helpful to draw a genetic cross diagram. If we look at the diagram, we can see that 3 out of the 4 possible children will not have cystic fibrosis. This means that the chance of the next child not having cystic fibrosis is 3 in 4, or 3/4, 75%, or 0.75. If Lewis and Maisie's parents want to know if their next child will have cystic fibrosis, they may choose to have genetic testing during a pregnancy. This is called prenatal diagnosis and tests a small piece of DNA from the pregnancy. Some people who know they have an increased chance of having a child with a genetic condition choose to have pre-implantation genetic testing, which is a special form of IVF in which embryos undergo genetic testing before being transferred to the womb. I will make a video about pre-implantation genetic testing at some point, but in the meantime, you might like to check out this video, which is linked below. It explains the process of IVF. Here's question 2. What is the chance that the next child will be a carrier of cystic fibrosis? I'm about to show you the answer, so pause the video now if you want more time. So, looking at our genetic cross diagram, we can see that 2 out of the 4 possible outcomes, the possible children, are carriers of cystic fibrosis. So this means that the chance is 2 in 4, which is actually the same as 1 in 2. Or you could write 50% or 0.5. Here's our final question. What is the chance that Maisie is a carrier of cystic fibrosis? Now, this is a bit of a tricky one, and people often give me the wrong answer, so do think carefully. I'm about to show you the answer, so pause the video now if you want more time. So, as we said in the previous question, 2 out of the 4 possible children are going to be carriers of cystic fibrosis. However, we already know that Maisie doesn't have cystic fibrosis, so she can't fall into this group. So this means she must belong to one of the other 3 groups, and 2 of those 3 groups are carriers of cystic fibrosis. This means that the chance that Maisie is a carrier of cystic fibrosis is 2 in 3, or 2/3, or 66.6%. How did you do? Did you get that one right? Comment below and let me know what you scored out of 3. Well done for reaching this point in the video. If you'd like some more help with this topic, then check out this video next. Otherwise, YouTube has chosen this one just for you. I hope to see you again soon.